Introduction to Poetry, exploring the essence and functions of poetry, forms of poetry, poetic devices. Hello and welcome to the Discourse. In this series, we will deal with the question what is poetry and discuss the various elements of poetry. We will explore various verse forms, poetic techniques and how to analyze them. We will delve into the language of poetry and discuss how poetry is an organized form. We will learn about figures of speech, meter, forms, rhyme, rhythm, imagery, persona or narrator, and sound patterns, which will also be discussed. We will analyze stanzas, different types of couplets, heroic couplets, blank verse, free verse, triplets, and others. We will also learn the importance of symbolism, imagery, allusions, and myth in poetry. So let us begin with the meaning of poetry. Poetry is a form of literary art that uses aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of language, such as sound symbolism, meter, and metaphor, to evoke emotions and convey ideas in a condensed and imaginative way. Unlike prose, which follows conventional grammatical structures, poetry often employs line breaks, stanzas, and creative wordplay to express deeper meanings. Poetry is more than just words on a page. It is a heartbeat, a whisper, a scream. It is where language dances, where emotions find their voice without always needing logic. Think of how a song can make you feel something deep even if you don't fully understand the lyrics. Poetry works the same way. It condenses life's big and small moments into something beautiful, painful, or profound. Some poems hit you like a punch to the gut. Others wrap around you like a warm blanket. And sometimes a few lines written centuries ago still feel like they were written just for you. Poetry can be defined as a type of literature that conveys a thought, describes a scene, or tells a story in a concentrated lyrical arrangements of words, often with attention to rhythm, sound, and imagery. If you had to pin poetry down to a definition, you would call it language at its most intense and musical. But that does not quite capture the magic of it. Poetry does not always play by the rules. It breaks grammar, invents words, and bends reality. A textbook might say it is a structured yet imaginative form of expression. But in truth, poetry is whatever makes us pause and feel. It can be Shakespeare's sonnets, Maya Angelou's raw honesty, or even the scribbled verses of a teenager's diary. What makes it poetry is not just rhyme or meter. It is the way it makes the ordinary feel extraordinary. One may wonder, why does poetry exist? What is its purpose? What are the functions of poetry? The first function is emotional expression. Poetry allows writers and readers to explore deep emotions. Poetry helps us process emotions. When you are heartbroken, you might turn to sad songs. Poetry does the same thing. Sylvia Plath's Mad Girl's Love Song captures despair in a way plain words cannot. The second function is aesthetic enjoyment. The beauty of language and sound creates pleasure. Poetry makes us see differently. A good poem can take something simple, a red wheelbarrow, a crow in the snow, and make it feel sacred. The third function is social commentary. Poets often critique society, politics, and culture. Poetry challenges power. Protest poetry, like Langston Hughes' Let America Be America Again, gives voice to the oppressed. In poems like Pushp Ki Abhilasha, Desire of a Flower, Makhan Lal Chaturvedi awakened the spirit of patriotism and sacrifice. The fourth function is storytelling. Narrative poetry, like epics or ballads, tells stories in verse. Poetry preserves memories. Before history books, there were epics like the Iliad, stories passed down in verse so they wouldn't be forgiven. The fifth function is therapeutic value. Writing or reading poetry can be healing and reflective. It connects us. Ever read a poem and thought, yes, that is exactly how I feel? That is poetry doing its job. The sixth function is philosophical exploration. Poetry examines life's big questions like existence, morality, time. People have been writing poetry for thousands of years, and not just to sound fancy. It serves real, deep purposes. Instead of examining what poetry is, let us discuss what poetry is not. Have you ever stopped to think about what really separates poetry from prose? At first glance, it might seem like just line breaks versus paragraphs, but the difference runs much deeper. All writing falls into one of these two categories, and while they sometimes overlap, their core purposes set them apart. Prose is the language of logic, clear, structured, built for explanation. Poetry, on the other hand, is the language of feeling, compressed, musical, built to evoke. That is not to say prose cannot move us or that poetry cannot make us think. Of course, they can. But when scientists publish research, philosophers debate theories, or lawyers argue cases, they don't turn to verse. They use prose. Why? Because precision and clarity matter most in those realms. Prose lays out ideas in a straight line. Poetry swirls around them, revealing truths that logic alone cannot capture. A poet is not just a writer, they are someone who feels deeply and sees differently. Where most of us glance at a rose and think that is pretty, a poet sees beyond the petals, the color, the scent, the delicate curve of the stem. Yes, those are there. But to a poet, the rose is also a doorway to memory, to longing, to the fleeting nature of beauty itself. Wordsworth once wrote about a man who saw a primrose and thought nothing of it. A primrose by a river's brim, a yellow primrose was to him, and it was nothing more. But to Wordsworth, that same flower was alive with meaning, pulsing with joy. That is the poet's gift, sensibility, the ability to feel intensely and imagine beyond the obvious. Poetry lets them shape those emotions into words, crafting a world that exists just beneath the surface of the ordinary. Poetry is not decoration, it is a way of seeing the world differently. This does not mean poetry is just pretty daydreaming. It is rooted in reality, just seen through a sharper, more emotional lens. Most of us feel things we cannot quite put into the words. Poets do it for us. A sunset is not just light and color, it is a burning farewell. A cracked sidewalk is not just pavement, it is a map of time's wear. So while prose explains, poetry reveals. One speaks to the mind, the other speaks to the soul. And that is why we need both, because life is not just facts and arguments, it is also wonder, grief, love, and all the things that cannot be neatly contained in sentences. Poetry gives those feelings a home. Poetry is not decoration, it is a way of seeing the world differently. Analysis of poetry. The key elements of poetry include compression, saying more with fewer words, musicality, use of rhyme, meter, and sound patterns, figurative language, metaphors, similes, and symbolism, and emotional intensity, evoking strong feelings. Breaking down a poem is not about killing its beauty with jargon. It is about listening to what it is really saying. Here's how to approach it. The first step is to ascertain kind of poetry. It can be lyric poetry, short, emotional, personal, or it can be narrative poetry, telling a story, a dramatic poetry written in verse but meant to be performed, a free verse, no strict meter or rhyme, or a haiku, a three-line Japanese form. Examine what kind of poetry it is. Is it a sonnet, 14 lines usually about love, a haiku, tiny snapshot of a moment, or a free verse poem that flows like a conversation? The form often hints at the poet's intent. For example, Horatian odes are often associated with the theme of carpe diem, which translates to seize the day in Latin. The next question that must arise is who is speaking. The persona, voice in the poem, the narrator, or the speaker is not always the poet. In the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, T.S. Eliot is not the insecure, aging man. He is the channeling one. Ask, who is the speaker? Why does their voice matter? Once you have confirmed who the speaker is, observe what the verse is depicting. What pictures does it paint? Imagery is not just descriptive words, it is a sensory experience. When Seamus Heaney writes, digging with the pen, in digging, you feel the weight of heritage in his hands. The next thing to be observed is the sound of the poem. How does it sound? Read it aloud. Does it rhyme subtly, like slant rhyme in Emily Dickinson? Does it crash like waves, alliteration in the wild wind wails? Sound can shape mood. Harsh consonants feel angry, soft vowels feel calm. The most important thing in a verse is the means of expression, the literary poetic devices that have been used in a poem. The subtle symbolism and alignment are important to observe. What is hiding between the lines? Metaphors, symbols, and irony add layers. When Robert Frost says, "Nothing gold can stay," he is not just talking about leaves, he is talking about innocence, time, loss. Poetry is not meant to be locked in a classroom. It is alive, meant to be read, argued with, scribbled in margins, and shouted at open mics. The best analysis does not just dissect, it listens. So next time you read a poem, don't just ask, "What does it mean?" Ask, "How does it make me feel? Why does that matter?" That is where the real discussion begins. In this section, we have discussed the idea and meaning of poetry, and we have tried to define it. We have discussed the worth and functions of verse and how different it is from prose. We also learned the importance of understanding the key elements of poetry to properly understand and analyze it. In the upcoming sections, we will discuss the language of poetry, poetic devices, how the figures of speech are different from parts of speech, and what the different and important figures of speech are. We will also discuss the different forms of a verse and its components, including structure, meter, rhyming scheme, tone, theme, and rhythm of the poetry, along with the importance of the point of view of the narrator. We will learn about the different kinds of stanzas, including couplets, triplets, quatrains, octaves, sonnets, and Spenserian stanzas. We will learn various figures of speech, including symbolism, irony, negative capability, ambiguity, tension, and juxtaposition. Then we will delve into analyzing the different forms of poetry. So this is it for today. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.